Hello and welcome to Devil's Advocate. How does the government respond to criticisms of its proposed Lokpal bill? That's the key issue I shall discuss today with the Law Minister, Salman Khurshid. Law Minister, let me start with a blunt question. Anna Hazare's team has said that the Lokpal bill cleared by the cabinet is a cruel joke. It's an attempt to fool the people. The BJP and the left have sharply criticized it. Clearly, this bill is unacceptable to large sections of the Indian people.
Well, that's a lot of things to answer. The irony is that I've said repeatedly, if not everyone, but I've certainly said it, that much of the quality of the present Lokpal bill was contributed to by members of the civil society that we interacted with.
Only to the extent that you've taken a few minor ideas from them. They're critical main ideas to do with the Prime Minister, the judiciary, MPs, to do with bringing state laukayoks into the bill, to do with the nature and size of the civil service that's involved. All of that you've ignored.
No, I think this is very critical. We have not agreed with everything they said, and many things they said, and I think for good reason. But why don't they at least say there is something we picked up from them? There was something we did, and that was not simply to defend ourselves or protect ourselves, because we believe they said something interesting.
Are you in a position where today you're yearning for their praise?
No. But to show that democracy, everybody counts, every voice counts. No matter how unhappy we may be about somebody's position, if that position has a valid reason to be implemented, we do. And that's the important thing. Lokpal is just as much about corruption as it is about democracy.
Well, you say that where valid things come up, you've implemented them. Let's go through the main points of controversy where clearly you haven't implemented what Anna Hazare's team was pressing for. And let's start with the Prime Minister. You've kept the Prime Minister out of the ambit of the Lokpal till he demits office. The point is that right up till now, the Prime Minister himself, Pranab Mukherjee, P. Chidambaram and Veerappa Moily, all at different points wanted the Prime Minister under the Lokpal bill. How do you explain their sudden change of heart?
This was a process of negotiating, explaining, and factoring into our arguments what was relevant and what was very, very critical. And I do believe, and so do we, most of us, that the Prime Minister's position in this country, as there would be in any country, the top executive functionary of the country, has so much dependent on them in terms of national security, in terms of international relations, and in terms of pivotal decisions, that if you want to bring a big question mark on that office during the time that a particular person is on that office, then you're going to hurt your country.
But then how do you explain the fact that in December 2010, Veerappa Moily, when he was in your job, actually wanted the Prime Minister in the Lokpal according to the draft he prepared at the time? Chidambaram seconded that. Earlier in 2001, Pranab Mukherjee was in favour of it and he was chairman of the parliamentary committee, and the Prime Minister's been in favour of it all along. How do you explain all of that?
So, do we have to accept that all wisdom came to an end on a particular date?
So these people have changed their mind?
No. Maybe I've changed my mind, maybe other colleagues have changed their mind. This is an ongoing dialogue where we consider every relevant issue from time to time in the context of our experience, and then we arrive at a position. Now, why should we say to someone, you have no right to change your position?
All right, let me put this to you. Your decision to keep the Prime Minister out of the ambit of the Lokpal is a clear breach of the United Nations Convention on Corruption, which India recently ratified. Article 2A specifies that all public servants must come under the anti-corruption mechanism, and the Prime Minister is clearly a public servant. You've gone back on a commitment you've made by signing that convention.
Just a minute. The convention also says that whatever arrangements you make in response to your signing that convention has to factor in your own national law. And the national law includes the Constitution.
Except for the fact that you've got Prashant Bhushan now saying that your attempt to give the Prime Minister immunity from the ambit of the Lokpal bill will be struck down by the courts because it's against the basic structure of the Constitution.
And the same Prashant Bhushan is not prepared to say that if we had included the judiciary as they wanted us to include the judiciary and had broken the barriers of separation of powers, then the courts would not have struck it down.
But that's a different matter. Don't confuse the two. One doesn't justify your action on the other.
Not at all. Not at all. But I'm not going to take Prashant Bhushan's opinion about what courts will strike down as final. All we have done is, for the period that someone is Prime Minister, we've only said that the Lokpal will not be able to inquire. Once he demits office, the Lokpal can inquire.
But look at the implication of the position you've taken. If the Lokpal existed today and were trying to investigate the 2G scam, it wouldn't be able to do so fully, because any paper, any document that leads to the Prime Minister or even to the Prime Minister's office would be exempt from the Lokpal's inquiry. That is not a situation that the people of India would be happy with.
Nobody has said that. Nobody has said that papers would not be available. Nobody has said that there'll be a vast area of ambiguity. All we've said is that the Prime Minister will not be a subject of an inquiry.
Absolutely. And one of the critical issues that's come up recently is the note dated the 15th of January 2008 on the Prime Minister's file saying the Prime Minister wants to be kept at arm's length. Now, that couldn't be inquired into under the Lokpal if the Lokpal were looking at the 2G case. That's why this is a terrible infirmity.
No, I'm sorry, then whoever's given this impression doesn't understand law. You can look at a document for one purpose, you may not be able to look at it for another purpose. Whenever there's a law of immunity, and here there is no immunity. This is only postponing for a particular period your right to inquire. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister remains susceptible to any action under the normal law of the land.
Yes, but not under the Lokpal. Let me put you the real moral point that Anna Hazare's team makes, which in fact they wrote to the Prime Minister about in June this year. They say there is no civilized country that we are aware of where the head of government is immune from corruption investigations. By keeping the Prime Minister out of the Lokpal, they're arguing that you're doing exactly that.
Shall I give you one example?
Yeah.
Shall I give you one example? And that one example is Singapore. In Singapore,
it's hardly a democracy. It's hardly a country.
You said one country in the world.
Well, we said one civilized country, by the word civilized they did mean democratic.
I don't think it's fair for him to be passing judgment on everyone. If you don't agree with him, you're not civilized. If you don't agree with him, you're not democratic. If you don't agree with him, then you're not honest. Sorry, this is not the way we'll have discourse on democracy.
But Singapore's democracy is what India wants to emulate?
No, but Singapore's success and happiness, you certainly want to.
Part of which is put down to the fact that they're not a functioning democracy.
No, that's not true. That is not true. To say that Singapore is not a democracy is wrong. But to say that Singapore is a different kind of democracy at a different level and stage from India, there are a lot of people who would say that India has flaws and India has warts in its democracy, which we've been working to remove.
I'll leave you with that answer. The audience will judge for itself whether they're happy for India's democracy and India's corruption institutions to be modeled on Singapore, or whether they prefer a different example to emulate. Let's come to the second area of controversy or decision, not to bring the higher judiciary under the Lokpal, and instead you wish to have them made accountable under the Judicial Standards and Accountability Bill. The key issue here is, are you prepared to give more teeth to that bill? Because as it stands, it has gross infirmities and people are concerned that it is not a sufficient mechanism on its own for making the judiciary accountable. So will you make that bill concurrently tougher?
Well, it's now the bill is before the Standing Committee. The Standing Committee is like a mini parliament in this country. Every party is represented there. No reason to believe that parties are going to have a special soft corner for the judiciary, except that we all believe that separation of powers and the constitutional arrangement is something that we should respect.
Well, let me put you the two areas where people feel the Judicial Accountability Bill is weak and it needs to be made tougher. First, it doesn't directly cover corruption. It talks about misbehavior, which is only tangential and indirect. Kapil Sibal in June, when he was interviewed by this program, gave a commitment that you'd be happy to strengthen the bill by making corruption an offence directly. Are you as Law Minister prepared to endorse that commitment?
Look, I'm sorry, I don't know how what Kapil has said has been understood. It's misconduct, and misconduct includes corruption. Do you have to actually call a judge corrupt to take action? if there is a wider ambit that even someone who doesn't take money but misbehaves in another manner would be subject to the same rigor of the law as someone who's corrupt, what's wrong with that?
So you think
but
misbehavior is sufficient? Misbehavior is sufficient.
In any case, I am not going to take a final view till we have a report from the Standing Committee, and the Standing Committee reports examined in the Ministry.
A second area where people feel the Judicial Accountability Bill is weak is the sanctioning authority that gives permission for a judge to be investigated. Under the bill, that authority will come from friends and colleagues of the judge who possibly sit on the same bench who may try to protect him. Under the Jan Lokpal bill, that sanction would come from an independent bench of 7, not connected to the accused judge and more likely to be impartial. Will you make your sanctioning authority tougher and more impartial?
Well, I believe that wherever there's a sanctioning authority, it should be impartial, and we have to provide for impartiality, but impartiality or the provision of impartiality cannot be based on your fundamental mistrust of everything in this country.
But you are prepared to look at the sanctioning authority again and ensure that its impartiality is guaranteed. That is what you seem to be saying.
Why are we bringing in a bill that this purports to provide accountability? Why are we doing it? We are doing it because we believe there should be accountability, but accountability within the 4 corners of the Constitution. We are not tampering with the Constitution because we do not, unlike Anna Hazare and his friends, we do not believe that the Constitution is inherently flawed.
So what you're saying to me, and I'm interpreting it for the audience, is that you will give teeth where necessary to make the Judicial Accountability Bill effective, so that Anna Hazare's fears that by not bringing the judiciary under the Lokpal, you're actually ducking the issue, those fears prove groundless.
Sorry, I'm not addressing anybody's fears. We are addressing what our basic conviction is, that we must have an above-board, transparent, accountable and outstanding judiciary, and we are proud of our judiciary, and we believe that if there are in any parts of the judiciary any people who need to be weeded out, the judiciary must have an internal system to do so.
Okay, I'll take that as a yes, even if it's an indirect sort of yes. The third area of controversy is your decision to leave MPs in terms of what they say and do in Parliament if the shadow of corruption falls over it outside the ambit of the Lokpal bill. Anna Hazare's team responds that this means that if a second JMM scandal were to happen today, the Lokpal wouldn't be able to cover it. Now, again, to the Indian people, that's an unsatisfactory outcome.
Sorry, it is unsatisfactory to the Indian people that when you see someone murder somebody on the streets, you don't shoot him down there and then in a police encounter? No. Police encounters are not allowed in this country against the worst criminals. You have to put the person on trial. You have to bring evidence. You have to convince the judge.
But who does it? The Lokpal or the Ethics Committee of Parliament? The Ethics Committee of Parliament has not so far been deemed to be effective in handling such situations.
May not be, but today at least the presiding officer of Parliament has the right to hand over any such problem.
But they don't do it.
But they don't do it?
Not once has an MP been found guilty of corruption.
That's not
in fact, not once has an MP been tried for corruption.
That is not
Which
true.
MP has been tried for corruption?
That is not true. MPs have been ousted from Parliament.
Yes, but not
MPs
tried
have
for
been
corruption.
Have been removed from Parliament.
But
they can be tried for corruption.
But they haven't been.
The fact that they haven't been, people haven't been. You know what is the conviction rate in our country?
No, let's not go to the conviction rate.
You know what a conviction rate in our country is?
But don't go to the conviction rate.
Are you going to do away with the IPC because the conviction rate is low?
Prosecution itself hasn't been brought. The question of conviction never arose.
Of course, we are moving step by step towards something that's going to be better than what is today.
People say that MPs are the source of the corruption in India because they need to raise enormous funds way above the legal limit to win their elections, and that's where corruption starts.
That's not MPs then. That is the electoral system.
Except that the people.
So shall we stop elections?
No.
If we don't have elections, there'll be no money required. No money required means no corruption.
What about the fundamental point that the Lokpal that you're devising would allow a JMM scandal to happen and not be investigated by the Lokpal? The Lokpal that you're devising allows the 2G not to be fully investigated, as I pointed out a moment ago. Both of those are serious concerns.
I don't think so that a 2G kind of a system or a 2G kind of a scandal would not be investigated. I believe this is complete falsehood to say that these kind of matters would not be investigated. And frankly, if something is not investigated by Lokpal, it will be investigated under the ordinary law of the land. Now, if the ordinary law of the land has not been effective in the past because we didn't have the right people and the right personnel and the right attitude, there is no reason why we should replace everything we hold dear in our Constitution simply because something didn't work in the past.
All right. I'll leave you with that answer. Let's take a break. I'm going to come back and put you 2 central concerns that Anna Hazare's team believes matter more to the Indian people than perhaps anything else. That's in a moment's time. See you after the break. Welcome back to Devil's Advocate and an interview with the Law Minister, Salman Khurshid. Salman Khurshid, let's come to two central issues that Anna's team believe matter more to the Indian people than perhaps anything else. First of all, they say all civil servants should come under the Lokpal. The government only wants to bring those at class A level and above. And as a result, Anna's team says that scams in areas that matter most to the common man, PDS, NREGA, water, electricity, sanitation, drainage, are completely excluded from your Lokpal.
Let's not get sentimental. The distinction...
This is sentimentality?
It is sentimentality and not scientific approach. Let me tell you why.
Surely this is things that matter to the ordinary Indian.
Let me explain. We gave them a choice. We said, there are two things that you have to do in this country. One is to address corruption in high places, big corruption, and the other one is the everyday irritants and the everyday frustrations of the ordinary citizen. Now, you can't have 11 people, 11 good and mighty people sitting in Delhi looking at everything that goes wrong in a district.
Except that they don't want 11 people, they want a Lokpal which can delegate downwards.
Right.
What's wrong with that?
So I'll tell you what's wrong with that.
Corruption is multifarious. You need a bigger Lokpal.
I will tell you, you can ensure that you have top, absolutely unimpeachable 9 people in this country. That also might be difficult. But how do you ensure that there are thousands of officers who are unimpeachable, that they will not have the same cancer of corruption that today
Just a moment. Just a moment.
People?
Are you as Law Minister telling me that you can't ensure that you can find 1,000 people who are unimpeachable?
1,000. Many more than 1,000.
You can't find 20,000 honest people out of a population of 1.2 billion?
So why can't we find the 20,000 people in the administration today?
Is that an explanation that will carry weight with the Indian people?
It's not an explanation. This is the fundamental principle of making a law.
So you're
that
saying
the law must not leave. The law must not leave two things. The law must not leave the opportunity for someone to go wrong and hurt the
All
system.
laws leave that opportunity theoretically. Don't bring it up as a problem in this case.
But you don't run and dive into it. Secondly,
are you really telling the Indian people that corruption will continue in PDS and NREGA, water, sanitation, because you can't find the people to stop it?
I'm not telling. What I am saying is you don't concentrate power, you decentralize power. And I'm also saying that if you have a quasi-judicial body, which is what the Lokpal is, that the fundamental principle of law is that quasi-judicial powers cannot be delegated.
All right, you're getting technical, maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, but the answer that you're giving the Indian people is that the corruption that affects them most, the government can't do anything about.
No, wait for my answer. I'm giving you the answer. The answer is that everything that the state government has to do can't be taken away by the central government. Two, that you will have to have, and this is what we've announced, we'll have a slew of legislations. We've given you RTI. RTI has gone a long way in accountability at the lowest level, and we will now give you a citizens charter. We will give you a CVC Act. We will give you an act that gives greater.
But there's one thing you're not giving again, and this is the second important thing that Anna Hazare's team wants to make up. They say that they would like a central legislation that provides not just for a Lokpal at the centre, but Lokayuk. You did that in the case of the RTI. You're not prepared to do it here. And the consequence, Anna's team says, is that state-level scams like fodder scams in Bihar, like mining scams in Karnataka, housing scams in Maharashtra, Taj Corridor won't be covered.
I've got your point. Giving pieces of paper and information is different from deciding a person's destiny, sitting in a district with unbridled, uncontrolled power and saying that today I sack you. Now listen.
Why would the Lokayukt have unbridled, uncontrolled power? If you created one, they would have the same checks as the Lokpal at the centre.
How will they have the same checks?
Just as the Lokpal has.
Why doesn't the Indian police have the same checks down to the bottom? Because we do know that if you give too much power to people at the lower level, they misuse that power.
So you don't trust Lokayuks to function properly? That's the second thing you're saying.
I don't trust delegation of powers that must remain with the Lokayukt, that must remain with the Lokpal. And I do believe
you don't once again trust the Indian people. Just as you don't find 1,000 honest ones, you don't trust them to accept delegated powers.
I trust the Indian people, but I've been told the very Indian people who elected me are not to be trusted with their choice. I am told that Parliament is going to take a view.
Turning the argument on its head.
I'm not turning the argument on its head. I am saying that you believe the smell of roses, but I do want to say this is a system that is perverse and pernicious. Please listen. They want to tap telephones. They want surveillance.
We're over time. I'm going to put this to you. You said, I believe the people smell of roses. Let me say, you think that they smell of something rather nasty.
Who? Who? The ones who are saying tap telephones. And
Okay.
I'm saying the people of India don't want phones to be tapped.
While there's a smile on your face. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Minister.
much.